This might be one of the most sensitive videos I've ever recorded um, because it concerns the way and manner in which Sam Paty, 47, a French teacher, was killed just for doing his duty as a teacher. This isn't a post about binary equivalences. This is a post which suggests that unless we look at everything in the round, we won't solve our problems, we'll just ramp up the conflicts. Here are the facts. Sam Paty was a 47-year-old geography and history teacher who was teaching an item on the French curriculum, which is compulsory for all students. It's an item about civics, which includes difficult topics like abortion, free speech, and so on. Now, he gave notice to his students that in the item on free speech and freedom of expression, he was going to deal with the Charlie Hebdo cartoons that satirized the Prophet Muhammad, and that if any Muslim students, of which there were many in his class, didn't want to look at the cartoons, they should turn around or not attend the class at all. So he did the class and he showed the cartoons. Shortly after that, there were many complaints amongst Muslim parents of that school. There were calls for his resignation. And in response, he put up a counterclaim for defamation of his character for doing his job. Long story short, on Friday the 16th, on his way either to or from school, he was set upon by an 18-year-old Moscow-born but French-grown Chechen lad who was Muslim. He attacked him with a large knife and beheaded him. Beheaded the teacher. Now, there are many ironies in our time, but in an age of guns, syringes, and 1,000 other ways to take life almost seamlessly, there is something that I think touches everybody when we start talking about beheadings. In a previous age, when guns and ammunition weren't available, uh, people wouldn't bat an eyelid, but it does seem an extreme way to take human life. So, French teachers have been up in arms about this. They have demonstrated en masse. And one of the French, the head of the secondary school teachers union has said they will continue to teach their students that, quote, everyone has the right to disagree. Now, the first question in this series of events is who the killer was. Born in Moscow, 18 years old, he was finally shot by the police, making a forward charge at them, armed with a knife. Now, of course, French police have automatic pistols and automatic rifles. They shot him to death. Most people who behave like that are perceived as mental patients, as people who are psychologically deeply disturbed. And if the tag of Islam had not been connected with this boy's name, most people would think this was a young person with mental problems who weren't berserk. But because of the Islamic philosophy that this boy claimed that he espoused, he became a terrorist. Now, there is a lack of equivalence there. If a young French boy, and because he grew up in France, he is effectively French, just Muslim, did something as bizarre as killing somebody with a knife and beheading them in a public place, you don't need to be a psychiatrist to imagine that this person is actually not sane. But because he was connected with Islam, he became a terrorist. Secondly, when the teachers came out protesting, one of the most prominent labels, which later went viral on Twitter, was Je suis prof, which means I am a teacher. Remember in the days when Charlie Hebdo was attacked and 12 journalists were killed by two terrorists of the time? They said, Je suis Charlie. That label went out. Now, and the teachers are saying that actually everyone has a right to disagree is what we're going to teach, and that everybody has a right to be heard. My question, when it comes to race, would these teachers be able to speak with such authority and come out en masse to display the fact that people need courage to talk about issues like race? I don't know. I don't live in France. I don't know. But the question naturally asks itself. And all the more so because France has a context for this sort of thing. It was only in July this year that 27 heads of Algerian freedom fighters were returned for a proper military burial back to their own country. And here's the history around those 27 heads. They were first of all severed from the freedom fighters. Secondly, they were publicly displayed in the marketplace in Algeria. Thirdly, the heads weren't returned to the nearest of kin of the bodies to which they belonged. They were shipped to France to be kept as collector's pieces. Now, where lies the humanity in that? It's taken over 100 years to get those heads back. And so when we're talking about any kind of crime, we must look at the context and the history which has driven the tensions that manifest as appalling conflicts today. Don't make a mistake. I'm the first person to say that anyone who commits murder is a monster. Unless somebody is physically threatening your life in the open to use deadly or lethal force, it's an act against another person's humanity, cannot be tolerated under any circumstances. So nobody in their right minds, I believe, of any religion or any philosophy, I'm not a Muslim, but of any religion or any philosophy, can sanction what this young boy did to this teacher who was, in his opinion, doing his job. So when it comes down to it, these issues are being discussed in the media as if they're an assault on the very civilization of France and European values. That's fine. But put that narrative within the context of what many European countries are doing in their former colonies even today. France has the longest and bloodiest history of the Western European countries when it comes to colonialism, with the possible exception of King Leopold of Belgium. Is this being taught in schools? Do people even know these things happen? How many people have heard about those 20 beheaded, the French called them terrorists at the time, freedom fighters, who years later managed to fight for the freedom and achieve the freedom of their country? Who knows about this? Is this taught? France is right now in a life or death struggle to try and maintain her profile amongst her old African colonies. Do the French people know about this? Do you, who's watching this video, know about this? Of course. This does not for 1 second excuse this. I can only call it barbaric. In the terms that I understand life, I can only call this action of killing a teacher doing his job in this way, I can only call it barbaric. But let that not cloud the fact that nothing happens in a vacuum. Everything happens within a certain context. So while we set this up as a story of the attack on Western civilization and Western values, let us be perfectly aware that Western civilization and Western values have seriously disenfranchised for long periods of time people in other parts, such that the flakier elements of those people will find any excuse to vent their rage and vent their spleen. Once again, nobody in their right minds is going to condone this activity. But let's not take the binary, this is good, that is bad attitude. Let's look at all of these things in the round. When we talk about civics, when we talk about the freedom of speech, let us really talk about the freedom of speech. Let us not quietly, socially censor discussions on the issues that affect people of Muslim background, of different ethnic background, of different color backgrounds, and so on, which are generally muted throughout. And if we don't, we will continue to inflame the forces that create such disgusting acts of animality. Because acts of animality are begotten by acts of animality in different places